Silent Hill F isn't perfect, but I still think it's amazing. It's been 13 years since the last mainline title of this series, so obviously the game had a lot of pressure on its shoulders ever since the start of its production. As soon as it was announced that the game would be set in 1960s Japan, rather than a rural 2000s America, the fanbase seemed to be divided into two fractions. One side being open-minded towards the change, and the story deepening its lore and creating something unique. But the other side seemed to be against the idea of the change, and it resented Konami for allowing the new developer to make such a dramatic shift in the story. But this cultural shift wasn't the only change that the new developer was adding to the franchise either, the new developer being Neobards Entertainment. In early development, it was announced that this game would be melee only, so there'd be no guns, which many of us view as a staple within the horror game community. So, coming into this game, there was a lot of changes to the generic Silent Hill formula. And after a decade-long nap, and I'm not even joking, Silent Hill hasn't had a mainline entry ever since Downpour released in 2012. This new release, being Silent Hill F, begs the question: is this finally the good Silent Hill game that us fans have been waiting for all these years? Well, let's start by discussing the game's most rewarding element: its story. A lot of my reasons for this being a good, if not amazing game, are justified by the story and how it's told. To get the most out of this game, you need to have an understanding of the story. Not just the events and its happenings, but also what it means and the symbolism at play here. There is a cultural difference getting into this game, and it is full of Japanese spirituality, so I am certain that there are things that I may have missed. But from what I do understand, I genuinely found this game to be fascinating.
You traitor!
So, in the haunting narrative of Silent Hill F, the entire gross experience in the fog-shrouded town of Ebisugaoka is subtly revealed to be the psychological projection of our main protagonist, Shimizu Hinako. Within the framework of the game, while it seems like Hinako is wandering through nightmare environments and battling against twisted monsters born from Japanese folklore, the true setting is actually her wedding day, and the entity known as Fox Mask, or Kotayuki, is representing her husband-to-be. So basically, when Hinako stands before the altar, feeling this weight of what she's about to leave behind, she is simply grieving a moment of when she once felt complete. This is why Hinako looks like a teenager, despite her actually being in her 20s. It's like a safe place in her teenage years, and she is desperately trying to remind herself of who she is, because she's scared of losing her identity. The monsters, the fog, this shifting in realities.
What happened?
They all represent Hinako's inner turmoil. She's battling with the negative feelings of the contemporary Japanese expectations of women at this time. She is both fearful and deeply resentful of these expectations, due to the idea of such things like marriage, childbirth, and the perception of ownership to the men she would potentially marry. Through Hinako's journey, the game uses metaphors of decay and bloom to dramatize this struggle of feminism within 1960s Japan. This is where women were expected to give up their identity in service of marriage, housekeeping, and motherhood. This internalized horror mirrors how Japanese society has long treated women. Despite decades of change within the new social normalities, to this day there still lingers rigid gender roles and expectations of being a good wife and a good mother. This is a story about expectation, isolation, conflict, and identity. And in keeping with the method of prior Silent Hill games, Silent Hill F is a dissection of the psyche of the main protagonist. Everything in the game is built around Hinako's destabilizing perception of herself and the people within her life. There are two subtopics that I want to discuss next. The first being music, and the second being characters. So firstly, the music. Within the game, it creates so much tension in the atmosphere, and it captures the essence of the game perfectly. It's genuinely mesmerizing at times, especially during the opening section. And the background OST is a haunting return to the classic Silent Hill themes that captures everything fans love about the series. Akira Yamaoka, the legendary composer behind the franchise's most iconic soundtracks, once again proves his mastery in blending beauty and horror into something deeply human that somehow reflects the emotions of the main characters in the specific game. His use of melancholic melodies, distorted ambience, and eerie silence at times creates an atmosphere that seeps into the player's subconscious, making every moment feel personal and emotionally charged. The soundtrack drifts between sorrow piano pieces and unsettling hums, even throat singing at times, which can sound like screaming in tense situations. This is perfectly reflecting the fragile psyche of Hinako and the decaying world in which she inhabits. Each track feels alive, echoing themes of memory and transformation that define the narrative. So now that I have that rant out of the way, we can continue to discuss the next subtopic, this being the characters. Firstly, I think it's important to note that every character in the story isn't themselves. And I know that might sound really confusing, but what I mean to say is that we as the audience are seeing everything through the eyes of Hinako. And knowing that we are stuck in a psychological projection for this entire game, it means that we are actually seeing every character the way Hinako sees them. So we aren't seeing them for who they really are. And Hinako, just like every other Silent Hill protagonist, is an unreliable narrator. For instance, when we first see her sister Junko at the beginning of the game, we can't see her face. Meeting her at later sections of the game, her face is covered by a mask. So this is a visual metaphor for how Hinako views marriage, taking away the woman's identity in exchange to be the perfect match for her husband. Junko is also slightly a villain in this game, constantly pushing Hinako to see the bigger picture, or as she says, understand why you're here. And after understanding the events of the game, we can only assume that Junko is wanting Hinako to follow through with the wedding to Katayuki, knowing that it will help their parents to pay off their debts. And from what we also learn throughout the game's alternate endings, Katayuki is just a genuinely nice guy, so Junko is probably just happy for her sister that a nice guy like Katayuki is interested in marrying her. But Hinako doesn't want this, and again it is her right to choose. And because Hinako doesn't want this, her sister is seen as a villain, and as a traitor. Within the game's journal, we can read how Hinako is upset that her sister got married. She notes down, "She's always been there for me, ever since the day I was born, until she left to get married." So naturally, this would make Hinako feel isolated. Her sister, who has always been there for her, has left. This could have a connection to why Sakuko, Hinako's friend, calls her a traitor. Within Hinako's world of Silent Hill, Hinako feels like Junko betrayed her when she got married. So naturally, Hinako feels like she is betraying her best friend. Each character in the story is important, but arguably the most interesting is Foxmask, also known as Katayuki. As I mentioned before, he represents Hinako's husband-to-be. His character is presented to us very early within the game, and he's introduced as this powerful entity that deeply cares for Hinako's well-being. And it's instantly obvious that whatever Foxmask is, he is somehow connected to the spiritual forces that reside within Ebisukeyoka. Throughout the game, we are given small hints that the elves of the town worship this deity called the Inari Sama, that holds the likeness to a fox. So the logical conclusion is that Foxmask is either Inari Sama himself, or someone who is very close to this mysterious god. Questions that arise from this information stick with you throughout the entirety of the game, making you constantly skeptical of his character. His care for Hinako sometimes feeling inauthentic, despite having very little evidence to validate this. Characters like Rinko and Shu are also really important to the game's narrative. Rinko embodies the expectations that were placed upon women in 1960s Japan, a time when obedience, modesty, and social grace were seen as a measure of worth. Unlike Hinako, Rinko has accepted these rules. She dresses properly, speaks gently, and moves within the narrow boundaries that society allows of her. Metaphorically, Rinko represents the suffocating law of fitting in.
Because I want to fit in.
The kind of quiet existence that Hinako both envies but also fears. Shu, in contrast, represents genuine emotion and the danger of suppressed affection. Because he truly loves Hinako. Not out of pity, but out of understanding. He sees her isolation, he sees her quiet strength, and he sees her sadness. And he's drawn to it. But in a world ruled by appearances and class expectations, his love is doomed. He cannot save her from the cruelty of others, or even from her own internal decay. In Silent Hill, Shu's love twists into obsession and guilt. His monstrous form mirrors the way love can decay when it's burdened by regret. To Hinako, Shu is both a comfort and a torment, acting as a constant reminder of what might have been. And this leads us to the best character of this game, our protagonist, Hinako. One subtle story beat that I think is really cool, but sadly goes unnoticed, is right at the beginning of the game. When monsters first pop up, Hinako simply runs away. But she only picks up a weapon and starts fighting back when she hears her friend, Rinko, cry for help. This instantly says a lot about her character, and I think it's really cool. Hinako is also burdened by feelings of paranoia and anger, which provide an edge to her character. And these feelings slowly build, and they grow, and eventually give way into a descent into insanity. Silent Hill F shows Hinako's insanity as internalized demons and monsters, carefully created by the fog to force Hinako to face the ugliest parts of her mentality. And this leads me to the next topic of discussion, the monsters. Silent Hill F's concept artist, Kira, did a great job at conjuring monsters that felt familiar to the franchise, but also kind of new and conceptually designed around Japanese spiritual influences within the story. The hallmark of a well-designed monster is how much morbid curiosity they instill within you. And many of the monsters within this game left that impression on me. That being said, I am interested to see what Masahiro Ito would have designed. He's the original artist for the early games. But Kira still did an amazing job because all of the monsters felt really disturbing and well crafted. And they all have this psychological internal theme that ties them to Hinako. An early example of this is the first monster we ever see in the game, the Kashimashi. The metaphor for this is basically one of objectification. Within Hinako's notes, we can see that she complains about not being heard and not having a voice. And this creature is doll-like, with its eyes crossed out and its mouth sewn shut. This is showing that Hinako fears that women are just dolls for men. And the main weapon that they carry is a kitchen knife, which I don't even need to explain what this means. Another monster close to Hinako's mentality is the Ayakakashi. This reflects childhood innocence being corrupted through peer pressure or bullying. And this is due to Hinako not being the average stereotype for a girl within 1960s Japan. It's mentioned quite often that she can be boyish on how she acts, and how her best friend, Shu, doesn't treat her very ladylike. He calls her partner, and not in a relationship way, but because they were playing together ever since they were kids, pretending that they were space rangers and fighting aliens. So this partner nickname just kind of stuck. But this list of monsters relating to Hinako's mentality, it can go on. For instance, the Ara Abare, that flesh-looking mass that you see in the game with blade limbs. This externalizes Hinako's fear towards her father. The blades represents a moment in Hinako's life where her father threw a knife at her, and that's always left a mental scar. Another monster is the birthing mother. This is Hinako's fear of motherhood, and what her future might look like if she stops resisting. The Sukuko-like entity is a metaphor for Hinako's guilt, and the betrayal of her friendship obligation. And the Rinko-like entity is a metaphor of rivalry, jealousy, and the pressure to conform. But perhaps the most important monster in this game is the fog monster. This thing chases Hinako during events of the game, like she owes it money, and its face has been removed. So it's physically showing its loss of identity. It's also wearing a shiramuku, which is a traditional Japanese wedding dress. So it's quite obvious that this monster is Hinako's current view of herself. It literally embodies her fear of marriage, because it's her fear of losing her identity. The monsters in Silent Hill Earth are more than just obstacles. They are symbolic projections of Hinako's internal conflicts. And it's important to note that they often appear in moments when her inner world, or her psychology, is especially fragile. The Dark Shrine sections of this game represent her mindset. The game makes that blatantly obvious ever since the beginning. And it represents how she feels forced to confront what others expect of her. That's why the ending of the game is set within the shrine, because it's all just happening inside her head. And this leads me to the next topic to talk about: the gameplay. For those who might be coming to Silent Hill Earth from the Silent Hill 2 remake, it might feel a little confusing. This game takes place in 1960s Japan, rather than that classic 2000s rural American town that we're all so familiar with. And as I said earlier, you don't have any guns. It is strictly melee focused. And in exchange for limited ammo, like you would have in a Silent Hill game with guns, this game has no guns, and it limits your weapon usage by implementing a durability system. Because, let's be honest, it's not a true Silent Hill game unless you're fighting the metaphorical manifestation or your inner traumas with a steel pipe. So, as you can imagine, you can't hold on to your weapons for very long, unless you use these toolkits that you can find when exploring the local environment. Which is cool, but it can get kind of annoying, especially when your favourite weapon breaks and you're left defenseless against this giant blob of goo. But it was actually really satisfying landing a parry attack on an enemy, and then wailing on them with a flurry of light or heavy attacks while they're down. And this game also encourages you to run away from encounters sometimes, simply as an act of resource management. So despite not having any guns for self-defense, this game does still capture that claustrophobic feeling of being limited for items. And there's a sanity meter too, which you can use to charge up attacks and essentially slow down time to make parry attacks slightly easier to make. This combat is definitely unique, and I can understand why some people don't like it. Personally, I do see the issues, but I can look past them because I'm just such a huge fan of Silent Hill, and I think having a slower combat, it kind of feels reminiscent of the older games. That being said, there are sections in the game, definitely during the final act, when you're caught in this stupid tournament type of thing. It feels like a combat block, where the game won't allow you to progress to the next area unless you take down every single enemy within that section. And that can get annoying, especially near the end of the game, because the combat can become quite repetitive. You have a few basic inputs, like a dodge mechanic, a light or heavy attack, and a charge attack, but that's it. So it can get annoying, but that being said, I still like the combat. Konami are trying something new, and I respect it. They could have easily just copied and pasted the combat from Silent Hill 2 Remake, because that worked amazingly, but instead they tried to make something unique. Capcom did this when they made Resident Evil 4. They could have easily chose to play it safe and stick to the classic fixed camera angle perspective, which at first they did debate doing. But instead they chose to create the third-person action shooter that we all came to love. And they essentially paved the way for a new gameplay style. So it is important for developers to try something new every now and then, adding new gameplay mechanics within games, because it gets us out of this funk of having the same gameplay style just duplicated across multiple titles. So the combat in this game, despite being repetitive, is still fun. My only complaint is that they included this stupid stun lock animation when one of the enemies grabs you, and you're basically forced to watch this 5-second cutscene until they finish their attack, and they always inflict damage. You can't even toggle your controller or anything, or button mash to break free. So it's like someone basically just took the controller away from you, and then hands it back. So this can ruin the pace of the combat. And another complaint is the inventory system. The inventory system in this game, if I'm being 100% honest, is really bad and really annoying. The New Game Plus option adds a little extra space for you, but it can still be a nuisance. Limiting items isn't new to Silent Hill, but what is new is the sheer amount of collectibles. You get caught on multiple occasions, having to choose to literally just throw something away, just so you can make space for another item that you think could be useful. Silent Hill 4 had an inventory box that you could store items in as you progress through the game. and that would have been perfect for this game. But Silent Hill F doesn't let you have this. Instead, you can enshrine items in exchange for faith. And faith can be used like a currency in this game. You can purchase upgrades or Amamori charms, which provide special abilities. What doesn't help is that some of the items can kinda suck, but you hold on to them during your first playthrough, thinking that they're important. But the flip side to this is that at least you know for next time to not pick them up. And finally, the puzzles in this game are cool. Some of them can be frustrating, but if you play on story or normal difficulty, it isn't too challenging. The only problem is that when you do get stuck, you get stuck for a while. I personally got lost in this box puzzle in the middle school section, literally just because I couldn't tell the difference between flowers. In the end, this game is a solid 10 out of 10 for me. The gameplay can become repetitive, but it feels really realistic, which improves upon your immersion. The environment and the general look of this game too is stunning and incredibly impressive. The story is haunting and tragic, and it sends a message about identity, repression, and what it means to find freedom in a world that is determined to define you. Silent Hill F is a game that turns horror inwards, using its grotesque beauty to explore the silent suffocation of women in a society obsessed with appearances. Through Hinako's journey, it slowly reveals how easily innocence can be crushed beneath tradition, and how that line between purity and rot is thinner than we'd like to believe. This game is unsettling, it's poetic, and it's depressing. It's very, very depressing. But it acts as a reminder that the most horrifying monsters aren't just born in the dark, but they are quietly nurtured behind the masks we are forced to wear.
This is what caused it all.